The soil of Alexandria, Virginia, in late July, was less like earth and more like baked clay. Owen Reed wiped a thick forearm across his brow, leaving a streak of dark topsoil against his weathered skin. At 54, Owen had spent 3 decades landscaping the sprawling old money estates of the East Coast, but the Croft property was a different beast entirely. Built in 1922, the estate was a fortress of limestone and ivy originally owned by the late General William Croft, a man whose name was whispered with equal parts reverence and fear in Washington's defense circles. Now it was occupied only by his widow Beatrice Croft, an 82-year-old ghost of a woman who rarely left the confines of her second-story bedroom. Owen drove his spade into the ground near the base of a dying century-old oak tree. Beatrice had specifically requested, via a handwritten note slipped under his paycheck, that the perimeter of the old oak be cleared for a new bed of hydrangeas. On the 4th thrust, the shovel didn't bite into roots or rock. It struck something hollow with a dull metallic thud. Frowning, Owen dropped to his knees. He used his trowel to scrape away the dense, reddish earth. About 2 feet down, the outline of a rectangular object emerged. It was a lockbox, roughly the size of a large humidor forged from heavy lead-lined steel. It was completely encased in a thick shell of rust, save for a faintly embossed seal on the lid, the unmistakable eagle of the Department of Defense, flanked by a string of faded serial numbers. Curiosity overriding his exhaustion, Owen wedged the tip of his spade under the box and pried it free. It was impossibly heavy, weighing perhaps 30 pounds. He carried it to his work shed behind the greenhouse, the heavy iron handle groaning against its pins. Inside the stifling heat of the shed, Owen set the box on his workbench. He grabbed a can of penetrating oil and a heavy crowbar. It took 20 minutes of soaking the hinges and violently torquing the steel before the rusted latch finally gave way with a sharp crack. Owen threw back the lid. He expected old bearer bonds, perhaps classified war documents, or maybe even gold bullion. Instead, the box was lined with impeccably preserved moisture-wicking foam. Nestled within the foam were 2 items, a thick leather-bound journal and a mechanical object that defied immediate logic. It was a sphere roughly the size of a grapefruit, constructed from brushed titanium and polished brass. It looked like an impossibly complex gyroscope, layered with concentric rings, delicate copper wiring, and a small glass-encased vacuum tube in the center. At its base was a heavy, cylindrical battery pack and a single red toggle switch. Owen reached out and carefully lifted the sphere. It was cool to the touch. As his thumb brushed against the red toggle, he felt a strange static charge raise the hairs on his arm. Without thinking, he pushed the switch forward. The device didn't roar to life. It didn't flash. It emitted a single ultra-low frequency hum, a vibration Owen felt in his teeth rather than heard. And then the world broke. The deafening roar of the cicadas outside the shed abruptly vanished. The stifling breeze that had been rattling the corrugated tin roof ceased instantly. Owen gasped, stumbling back, but the sound of his own breath was muffled, sounding as if it were echoing from the bottom of a well. He looked toward the open window of the shed and froze. A hummingbird, which had been darting around the trumpet vines, was suspended in midair. Its wings, normally a blur of motion, were perfectly statically visible, caught at the apex of an upward stroke. A drop of condensation that had dripped from a rusted pipe above the sink was hanging perfectly spherical, an inch above the basin, refusing to fall. Time had stopped. Panic clawed at Owen's chest. He tried to move and found that he could, though his limbs felt incredibly heavy, as if he were wading through deep water. He reached out and touched the suspended water droplet. It felt solid like a tiny bead of glass before his finger pushed through it, causing it to instantly splatter against the porcelain. He looked back at the hummingbird. It remained frozen, a monument to a halted universe. His eyes darted back to the sphere on the workbench. The vacuum tube was glowing with a faint, pulsating violet light. Owen lunged forward, fighting the immense resistance of the air itself, and slammed the red toggle backward. Instantly, the cicadas screamed back to life. The hummingbird darted away in a flash of iridescent green. The breeze rattled the tin roof. Owen collapsed against the workbench, his chest heaving, his shirt soaked in a cold sweat. He stared at the device, terrified. It wasn't magic. Magic wasn't real. There had to be an explanation. Trembling, he reached into the box and pulled out the leather-bound journal. He opened it to the first page. The handwriting was erratic, written in a hurried, slanted script. August 12th, 1974. If you are reading this, I am already dead. My name is Dr. Henry Croft. I am the lead acoustical engineer for DARPA's Project Kronos. And my father is going to kill me. Owen's blood ran cold. Henry Croft was General Croft's only son. The official story, the one the town of Alexandria had whispered about for decades, was that Henry had hanged himself in the estate's attic after a severe bout of depression. Owen turned the pages reading in a frenzied blur. The journal detailed a classified military project designed to create the ultimate crowd control and assassination weapon. We didn't manipulate time, Henry had written. Time is a construct we cannot break, but we can break the human perception of it. The Kronos resonator emits a highly concentrated neurokinetic stasis field. It utilizes a combination of infrasound and localized electromagnetic frequencies that perfectly match and subsequently overload the human nervous system's beta waves. Owen read on, horrified. The device didn't freeze the world, it paralyzed the motor functions of every living thing within a 60-foot radius, while simultaneously hyper-accelerating their visual and auditory cortex. To the observer outside the field, the victims simply freeze in place, their muscles locked in perfect tension. To the victims inside the field, their brains are processing information at an impossible speed. A single second feels like an hour. A minute feels like a lifetime. They are trapped in their own minds, statues in a world they perceive to be standing still. The journal detailed the horror of the animal trials the ethical lines crossed, and Henry's ultimate decision to sabotage the project. My father sees this as the ultimate weapon, an invisible field that can freeze an entire battalion, allowing operatives to walk among them and execute them point blank. When I told him I was destroying the prototype, he looked at me not as a son but as a traitor. I know he has ordered my termination. I have encrypted the final blueprints in these pages and buried the only working prototype. May God forgive us. He was a brilliant boy, a frail, raspy voice said. Owen violently flinched, dropping the journal. Standing in the doorway of the shed, leaning heavily on a silver-tipped cane, was Beatrice Croft. She looked smaller than Owen remembered, frail but possessing a gaze as sharp as cut glass. She was staring directly at the titanium sphere on the workbench. Mrs. Croft, Owen stammered, stepping in front of the workbench to block her view. You shouldn't be out here in the heat. Step aside, Mr. Reed. Beatrice said, her voice completely devoid of the tremor of age. I know what you found. I am the one who told you to dig there. Owen froze. You knew this was down there. Beatrice limped into the shed, her eyes locked on the rusted box. For 50 years, Owen. For 50 years I have looked out my bedroom window at that oak tree, knowing my son's legacy, his curse, was buried beneath its roots. The journal says your husband, Owen trailed off. William murdered him. Beatrice stated the words cold and devoid of emotion. He had his own men stage it. They broke my son's neck and hung him from the rafters like a piece of meat. Then they spent a month tearing this estate apart, looking for the prototype. But they never thought to check the roots of the oak tree. Henry had planted it himself when he was a child. "Why tell me to dig it up now?" Owen asked, stepping back from the device. "Why not leave it buried?" Beatrice reached into her cardigan and pulled out a small encrypted mobile phone. Because William's old masters never stopped watching. For 5 decades, this property has been under passive surveillance. Department of Defense DARPA, maybe ghosts with no names at all. They've been waiting for a localized electromagnetic spike. They've been waiting for someone to turn it on. Owen felt his stomach drop. He had turned it on. "They know," Beatrice said softly. "The moment you flipped that switch, you sent a flare into the sky. They are coming, Owen. In fact, they are already here." The crunch of heavy tires on the gravel driveway confirmed her words. Owen rushed to the window. 3 unmarked black SUVs had violently swerved onto the estate, tearing across the immaculate front lawn. Dust plumed into the air as the doors swung open, before the vehicles even came to a complete halt. A dozen men in tactical gear, armed with suppressed rifles, began fanning out across the property. Leading them was a man in a sharp grey suit, Agent Mitchell, though Owen would never know his name. "They will kill us both," Owen said, backing away from the window. "They'll take the device and they'll bury us under the house." "They won't take anything," Beatrice said. She walked over to the workbench and picked up the leather-bound journal. She shoved it hard into Owen's chest. "Take this. There is a man in Geneva, a journalist named Vance. No, never mind names. Inside the back cover is a business card and a Zurich routing number. You take this, and you run. Run where they have the property surrounded." Beatrice looked at the titanium sphere. She reached out with a trembling, liver-spotted hand and placed it over the red toggle switch. "Henry built this to run on a highly volatile lithium-ion core," she said, her eyes meeting Owen's. "It was never meant to be activated more than once. The battery has degraded. If I turn it on now and force the frequency output to its maximum radius, it will create a stasis field covering the entire estate. You'll freeze them," Owen realized. "And myself," Beatrice said, a sad smile touching her lips. "I am too old, Owen. If I am caught in the field, the neurological strain will cause a massive stroke within seconds. But it will give you exactly 3 minutes before the core completely melts down and the field collapses. 3 minutes to walk right past them." "I can't let you do that," Owen said, stepping forward. "You are a gardener, Owen." Beatrice snapped her voice, echoing with sudden fierce authority. "My son was a genius. My husband was a monster. I am a mother who failed her child. Let me do this one thing right." Outside, the heavy boots of the tactical team hit the wooden planks of the back deck. "Shed!" a voice barked. "Move, move!" Beatrice looked at the door. 3 minutes, Owen. Run into the woods. Do not look back." Before Owen could argue, Beatrice slammed the red toggle forward and twisted the glass vacuum tube sharply to the right. The violet light didn't just pulse, it exploded blindingly bright. The low hum returned, but this time it was a deafening, bone-rattling roar that instantly dropped to total terrifying silence. The shed door burst open. Agent Mitchell was in the doorway. His pistol raised his mouth open in a mid-shout. He didn't move. The tactical agents behind him were caught in mid-stride one, with his foot hovering inches above the floorboards. The dust kicked up by their boots hung in the air like a cloud of frozen brown smoke. Owen looked at Beatrice. She was standing at the workbench, her hand still on the device. Her eyes were wide, staring straight ahead. A single tear had fallen from her eye, frozen halfway down her wrinkled cheek. She was entirely motionless. The air felt like molasses. Owen shoved the journal into the back of his jeans and pulled his shirt over it. He moved toward the door, fighting the incredible physical resistance of the stasis field. It felt like walking through a rushing river. He approached Agent Mitchell. The man's eyes were wide, pupils dilated. He wasn't a statue. He was a living man, trapped in a prison of his own, accelerated mind, fully aware but entirely unable to move a single muscle. Owen pushed past him, his shoulder brushing against the agent's frozen arm. It felt as rigid as iron. He stepped out of the shed and into the yard. The world was a macabre photograph. Leaves caught mid-fall from the dying oak tree. A crow suspended in the sky above. The tactical team scattered across the lawn, paralyzed in poses of aggressive motion. Owen didn't run, he couldn't. He forced his legs to move, adopting a slow, agonizingly heavy march toward the dense tree line at the edge of the property. Every step required monumental effort. He kept his eyes fixed on the forest, refusing to look back at the shed, refusing to look at the woman who was currently dying in a silent, stretched-out eternity to buy his freedom. He reached the edge of the woods. He pushed through the first line of thick pine branches, the needles scraping against his face, rigid as wire brushes. Behind him, deep within the shed, the violet light began to flicker. The glass vacuum tube overloaded and, degrading, cracked. Owen took one final heavy step into the dense brush. Crack! The sound of the vacuum tube shattering was like a gunshot. Instantly, the heavy resistance vanished. Owen fell forward into the dirt as gravity and real-time physics reasserted themselves. Behind him, the world erupted into chaos. The crow in the sky cawed and flapped away. The leaves hit the ground, and the tactical team stumbled forward, collapsing over their own momentum. "Breach, breach!" Agent Mitchell screamed, rushing into the shed. Owen lay in the dirt, breathing heavily, listening. "Clear!" a voice yelled from inside. "We have a female down. No pulse." "Where is the device?" Mitchell's voice roared. "Secure the device." "Sir, it's slag. The core melted. It's completely destroyed." There was a long, heavy silence from the shed, broken only by the sound of Mitchell kicking a metal bucket across the floor. "Find the gardener." Mitchell ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Find him now." Owen Reed didn't wait. He pressed his hand against his lower back, feeling the solid, rectangular weight of the leather journal beneath his shirt. The legacy of Dr. Henry Croft, the sins of General Croft, and the final ultimate sacrifice of Beatrice Croft. He stood up, melting into the shadows of the Virginia woods, carrying with him the blueprints to a weapon that could stop time itself, swearing that it would never see the light of day again.